There are 19 million war veterans living in the United States today. 19 million men and women who've lived extraordinary lives. 19 and small gestures. These are the Americans who witnessed history. These are the wars, as seen through their eyes. These are the stories of veterans from World War I, World War II, and the Korean, Vietnam, and Persian Gulf Wars. Each day, we lose 1,500 of those who served, and we lose more of our history as their stories go untold.
Recording those stories is a part of America's history. The entire story will come together when you tell your part of it.
Millions of Americans. Millions of stories. Tell your story. Ask others theirs. There's no story or sacrifice too small.
I urge all Americans, veterans and non-veterans alike, to participate in this very, very important project. Veterans help to shape our nation's future. And only by understanding what they did for us can we truly understand the price of freedom.
Hello, my name is Frank Boring. I am the Director of Oral History at the Michigan Military Preservation Society. We are a nonprofit organization that's building the Michigan Military Air, Land, and Sea Museum at the Gerald R. Ford International Airport. What you've just seen is an excerpt from a promotional film that was put out by the Library of Congress Veterans History Project. The Library of Congress Veterans History Project is an attempt to gather material, oral histories, documents, diaries, letters from all over the country of our veterans. Here at the Michigan Military Museum, we are a partner archive with the Library of Congress. What this means is that all the materials that we gather stay here in Michigan. We identify them, we put them into a database, and we will make them available to future generations to access through our website. What you're about to see is a raw, uncut oral history interview. At some later date, we will actually edit these and make them available through the schools. At this point, you will have an opportunity to see what it's like to have an actual oral history interview. These will be going on each week with a different veteran. We hope you enjoy. Let's begin with your name and where and when you were born.
I'm Harold Kuizema. I was born at 930 Adams Street at home in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
In what year?
1925.
What was your early schooling like?
I went to a school that I could walk to. It was Oakdale Christian School. Many of my neighbors were also attending the same school. It was a school that my father had attended, a school that my mother was a teacher at.
Were you in your mother's class?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. Unique thing, when my mother had me, she could not teach. That was on the rules and regulations.
Okay. Now, you went through high school
Yes.
as well, but given that you were born in 25, do you remember the December of 1941, Pearl Harbor? Do you remember that?
Oh, definitely. But don't ask me exactly where I was at the time, but I definitely remember the event, hearing the news on the radio.
What was the reaction of the people around you, your family and the people around you? I realize you were young at the time, but...
Well, I was in high school.
Yeah.
I was just starting high school, graduated in 43. We went through the 9th grade at Oakdale, and high school started at 10th grade. So it was just 3 years of high school.
Was there any sense of you're going to turn 18, you're going to have to go to war? I mean, there's people around you knew that were going to war, right?
At that time, if I recall correctly, you had to be 21.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And I thought, I think I maybe was 15, 16 years old, and I thought, no, this war is not one that I will be involved in.
Once you graduated from high school, what was the plan? What were you intending to do?
Well, my first idea is I was going to enlist in the Air Force, which I took the test, but they found I was colorblind, So no way was I involved with the Air Corps. Then we did a variety of things. After high school, we had a neighbor that wanted a car delivered out to California, so my good friend Andy and I accepted the offer and drove a car out to California.
Wow.
And we took Route 66 all the way. But the unique thing is, we thought, no, I realized we can get the gas, we could go down the ration board and get stamps from the approval of the person who wanted his car delivered out to him because he was in the military. We thought we were going to have other expenses, so we advertised in our local church paper for passengers. So we were able to get 2 young girls that wanted to visit their boyfriends and 2 older ladies, so we had 6 in a 38 Ford and headed out for California. And that was a unique trip. I can explain more about that trip. We went to California, Route 66.
Wow.
And, we traveled a little bit around California, and my good friend Andy had lived in Montana, and we spent a few weeks in Montana. And
enterprising young man.
Oh yeah. Anyway, that was a unique trip, and I think we did some work in Montana, and I can truthfully say that our whole trip cost me $6 up and back, from working and making money picking potatoes or picking spuds and so forth.
Now, when you returned back, though, as I understand it, you went to Calvin College. Is that right?
That was after I got out of the service.
Oh, after. Okay. Well, at some point, Uncle Sam came knocking on your door.
See, we took that trip in September of '43, and I had turned 18 in August of '43. So while I was gone, my folks received a notice that I had to report to Detroit. Well, they said, well, he's out of the state, and that delayed me a few weeks. When I came back, I immediately had to report, and from there I went to Detroit, and that was in, I believe, November, and by...
Did you have, on the road trip itself, as you're traveling through all the states and whatnot, were you getting news of what was going on in the war? I mean, did you have any idea of really what was going on?
Well, I know we got in California, we met a lot of servicemen, and we were real eager to give them rides, and we were kind of envying them. They were in the service, and they gave us altogether different ideas.
Yeah, these are guys that had already seen
they
action.
I don't know really if they saw action or
Okay.
not, but I mean, and I know coming back on the bus, when we get on a bus, it was always those who were going the greatest distance. The military were always first on the bus on a return trip, and those who were going the greatest distance. Of course, we going from California back to Michigan, we were one of the ones that were going one of the greatest distances, so we were always able to get on a bus.
Wow. What was the process of being inducted into, it was the Army, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what was the process? Where did you go?
Well, of course, first of all, we went to Detroit, and we came back, and we had waited, and they went to Chicago area. I forget the name of the camp, but anyway, we were sent out from there by train to California, and then I...
Were you still in civilian clothes at this point? You hadn't been issued?
Oh yeah, we were issued our uniforms.
Oh, okay. Where was that? At one of these staging areas you were given?
Illinois. I forget the name of the camp, but anyway, we definitely were issued our clothes and our uniforms. And
was this boot camp?
No, this was just
staging
induction, staging areas. And from there, I guess they gave us some tests and so forth, and then from there we were sent to wherever they wanted to, and I went to Camp Roberts, California.
And that's where you formally began
I had
military
my
training?
17 weeks of basic training.
Okay. Give us an idea of the first day you arrive. What are we seeing? Was this a big camp? Was it a small camp?
Oh, very, very large camp.
Okay. Well, visually, what am I seing? What was the camp like? There was barracks, there was...
Oh, there's a lot of barracks,
Okay.
and I mean, there was sort of a hall that was part of the barracks that we could go in there and play ping pong or play games, and there was also a wrestling kind of arena right in front, and We were quarantined, I think, for the first several weeks.
Quarantine, why?
Well, we just couldn't, I think we had to stay in camp for the first few weeks.
Oh, I see. It wasn't because of disease?
No,
or,
no,
okay,
no.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I always kind of enjoyed that. I mean, we were able to do a fair amount of marching and running, and I just come out of high school, and I thought I was pretty physically fit, and we had many in our group that were in the 30s, and we called them Grandpa.
Give us an idea of a typical day during boot camp. Let's see, you get up probably around, 10, 11 in the morning, you got some coffee there, croissants, and what was a typical day like?
We got up possibly 6 o'clock, and
Okay.
we'd have to get out and have reveille, and then I guess
Play with the trumpet or the bugle, the whole bit, wake you up?
Right. And then, of course, we would go to breakfast, and then we'd have calisthenics. Then later on, we were trained in specialties. I was in artillery unit.
Did you know why? Did you know why you were sent to that specialty?
I have no idea.
See, I didn't.
I have no idea.
Yeah. It must have been, what I'm figuring out is it must have been in the tests that you took at some point in time, because I find that out from a lot of vets that I talk to, is that they get sent to this one specialty, but they don't know why. So I'm sorry to interrupt. What was your specialty?
It was communications primarily.
Okay.
We learned how to operate the telephone, repair the wire and so forth. We also learned how to use the radio, operate the radio. We also were trained how to use flags and so forth.
Semaphore.
Okay,
yep.
And of course all the other things in basic training, which
was
include...
was the basic training area that you worked in what you'd picture? You've got to run through on logs, and you've got to go under barbed wire.
Yeah, all that was part of the
okay.
basic training. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have live ammunition shot over you?
Oh yes, we had that also. And I mean, for some reason or other, I sort of enjoyed that.
That's
we had to go in
interesting.
long runs, and I mean,
Yeah.
we'd maybe run, 10, 15 miles, something like that. And there's always a few of us that want to be at the head of the line. And if you were at the head of the line, you would be the first one that would arrive at the end, so you could sit and wait for the other ones for all the stragglers. And we had some officers that were pretty well fit, and we tried to keep up with them. And
what was your drill instructor like? I mean, obviously you get the impression of the guy that's screaming in your face and all that. What was your drill instructor like?
oh, he was a real disciplined individual, very much so. Sergeant Webb, I remember his name. But,
Sergeant Webb.
He was really disciplinary. And he must have taken a liking to me, because after that first few weeks, he made me an acting corporal. Then I had different duties. I never had to be on KP, or I had a little group that we would sort of work with. And
During this period of time, did you have any idea where you were going to go? Pacific or Europe?
I have no idea.
Okay. Were you getting any outside news, either by radio or by newspaper?
Oh yeah, we had radio.
Okay.
But I mean, later on, I enjoyed weekends. We had every weekends off, and I had a cousin that lived just a little north of them, and I'd go there weekends.
Oh, okay.
And there were a few people in the camp that I had been to high school with. One in particular, we went on pasture together on weekends. So I had my friends that I had been with in high school.
Wow, okay. Where did you go from there? You graduated, you passed through that particular period. Where did you go from there?
Well, I had a 15-day furlough. They put us on a train and headed us back home. And I think it was 15-day furlough. From there I had to report to Camp Atterbury, Indiana.
Were your parents alive during?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes, they lived many years.
Was there a concern on their part about, I mean, you're obviously enjoying yourself as an 18-year-old traveling all over the place in a uniform. Was there a concern on their part about your future and what
My
might happen to
dad
you?
particularly, because he was a World War I veteran. He realized what combat was like. And I remember the last time I left home, my dad was somebody who very seldom shed tears. When I left him, this was, of course, after I had left Camp Atterbury and went to Camp Miles Standish to go overseas. My dad really broke down. Wow. He realized this might be the last time he sees me.
Once you got back into the new camp after boot camp, was there more specific training now in terms of the communications and radio, more intense training?
Very much more intense training.
Okay.
And of course, we were put in different sections, and I was put in what they call a wire section.
Which is what?
Our responsibility is to lay wires from the guns to the OP, the observation point, and operate the phones at the guns or operate the phones at the OP.
Okay.
And we did a lot of laying a wire, operating the phones, and we thought it was sort of a unique operation because when you lay wire, particularly in training, you had to pick up wire afterwards because you just couldn't leave it lay there. So we were always the last group to come back to the kitchen. And we were kind of a small group of about 8 or 9 of us, kind of stuck together, and we would pick up the wire, and sometimes we'd go off into a little town and have some ice cream or something like that, and then go back to camp, and because they realized we would be late because we had to pick up the wire.
So in a sense, you guys had more freedom, if you will, with your time than your average infantry guy who's going to be marched back to do
Well,
this
we did
or do
marching
that.
and stuff like that too, but I mean
Right,
to say,
right.
by belonging with a small group,
Right.
and believe it or not, it was a group of 8, and I would say of the 8, we were 100% casualties in the Battle of the Bulge, but I was able to, over the years, find 5 of them. Wow. And I looked them up, I went to their homes, I had either a meal or breakfast with them, and one particular I've been many times over their house. We've gone on vacations together and so forth.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I mean, there's only 3 of them that I don't know what happened to, but 5 I have followed through with. It took me 30 years to find some of them.
That is wonderful. Once your training was completed in the United States, did they give you any indication of where you were going?
Yes, we had an idea where we were going.
Okay.
We had Colonel Kelly who made a little speech to us, and he made a speech to a group of us that were going to be German killers.
Wow.
So I assumed that we were going to Germany.
And so what happened? They loaded you up onto a ship, or how did you?
Well, of course, again, after we left Camp Atterbury, I had, I think, 15-day leave, and then I came back.
And this is the incident you were talking about where your dad
Well,
broke?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Yes, and then I went back to the camp, and then from there they put us on a train, went to Camp Miles Standish, and from there we went on the USS Wakefield.
Have you ever been on a ship before?
No, no.
How'd your stomach react?
Well, I was one of the fortunate ones. I did not get seasick.
Wow.
The ocean was very, very rough.
Yeah, yeah.
And
But a
of
lot of
course-
people were getting sick.
Yeah. In fact, the kitchen crew, they had apparently one group that happened to take charge of the kitchen, and most of that kitchen crew were the ones who were serving us were sick. And of course, when you on a ship, you eat standing up and so forth and so on. And
Was the ship crowded?
very, very crowded?
Okay,
very,
all
very
right.
crowded.
You're talking about hundreds, or are you talking about thousands?
I don't know, but I would say thousands.
Okay,
yeah.
thousands
Yeah.
around there. These are all Army guys, and
You know, we were all Army, all guys from our particular outfit.
oh, okay, all right. So the same people you were training with.
Oh yeah, and our officers, of course, they had special quarters, but I mean, they at least were on the same ship. And,
Yeah.
and from there, we went across. Took us about, I don't know, 7 days, something like that. And we
Zigzag?
landed- Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
To avoid the submarines. or
yes. Then we
potential
landed in
dangers.
Liverpool. And,
Oh, you arrived in Liverpool, England.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Did you have a King Neptune ceremony?
I don't
Yeah.
recall.
Okay.
I don't
All right,
recall.
because usually when you cross over, that doesn't matter. Arrival in Liverpool, you know now you're going to be part of the European theater.
Oh yes.
Where did you go from Liverpool?
Well, we went to a camp. I can't think of the name of the town quick like, but went to a camp and we had to get all our equipment and supplies. And I was delegated to go into Wales to pick up some trucks. So I had the opportunity to go into Wales and experience riding on the wrong side of the streets and the road and delivered the trucks. And of course, then we had equip our equipment, our trucks and so forth, and then we went to Southampton, put on LSTs, and went across the English Channel. Which
these are
very
the
rough.
landing crafts, that troop landing crafts.
Correct. We
Okay.
could our big equipment on it, our guns and our trucks. And
Did you
our
know where
jig-
you were going at this point? Did they tell you anything about what you're going to be doing at that point?
You don't know much. You just go where you're supposed to go. We know we were going across the English Channel, and I think I found out more afterwards than at the time. But we went by truck all the way across France. It was cold. It was rainy. We camped on the way.
What month was this?
This was late November.
November, okay. So it's
Yeah.
winter time.
Yeah, it was winter time.
D-Day had already happened.
Oh yeah. In fact,
You
as
knew
we,
about it. Did you know about it?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I was in Camp Atterbury on D-Day.
Okay.
So I mean, we kept pretty close track of that, and we knew what was going on. And
Okay.
oh yeah.
Did you know about the casualties?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So there's no illusions about what you're about to go into. You're in the aftermath of D-Day, but there's fighting and there's casualties. And was there any, I mean, you're 18 some odd years old, and was there any talk amongst you that, hey, this is dangerous stuff we're going into?
Maybe I was just too naive to realize some of the dangers. Sure, I was afraid. I was concerned. But some of the older men that were with us, I think, were more concerned. I know there was some in our outfit, they had girlfriends. They said, we're not going to get married because we may never come back. For some reason or other, I never thought that. But
Yeah. God, it's amazing. All right, so now let's get to where did you get to that started into the actual action that you got into?
of course, we traveled all the way across France. And,
Okay.
and
With no resistance?
No. Actually, we went right straight up to the front line, so to speak,
Okay.
and we took over the positions of the 2nd Infantry Division.
Okay.
And they were telling us that we were a nice, quiet area. They were well dug in. They had bunkers there. In fact, they were in a position that we thought was a very good place that we would possibly spend the winter there. They had stoves in some of their bunkers, and well, of course, our artillery was firing day and night because they made different crews whereby they would put half the crew in the daytime and half the crew at night, so they were firing day and night. Some of our men were put up at the OP, at the outpost, to operate the phones. I stayed at the battery. Fortunately, because my friends are up at the outpost, they were captured the first day.
So, all right, let's. You arrive there. It's wintertime. You've been told all about these stoves and amenities, and it's going to spend the winter there. It's going to be kind of a
That's
quiet.
what we thought.
What did you actually find? What did you actually find when you got there?
Oh, just exactly. I mean, we took over the positions of the 2nd Infantry Division.
Okay.
And some cases, we just exchanged guns, and we left the guns that were already set there. We took over their positions. We took over their phones, their wire that was there. We just took over, and they retreated to the back, to the rear. I don't know where they went, but I mean, they went to another location. And they were seasoned troops that had fought pretty much all the way across France.
Wow. And you guys are brand new to this. You've had your training and all that.
Oh yes.
So what was you said the first day your buddies were captured. What happened on that first day?
Well, I'm
for
talking
you?
about the 16th of December.
Okay. Well, what happened to you? What happened on?
Well, the morning of the 16th, of course, they shelled us very, very heavily. And because we were pretty well dug in, I don't recall any casualties that particular morning.
Okay.
Well, by afternoon, tanks start coming down the road. And we sent out a couple of men with bazookas, hopefully to apprehend these tanks. Well, the tanks must have realized because they were killed immediately. There happened to be a battery, which was just across the road, had a gun that was apparently, from what I understand, was not put in position because they couldn't get it all the way, and they had access to the tanks coming down the road. And they were able to knock out one of the tanks. In the meantime, those tanks opened fire on us. We had many casualties that afternoon. Our chief executive officer, Ted Kendall, was seriously wounded, plus many other men. That's when we started having casualties, because these tanks start opening up on us.
What was your particular job during this encounter? What were you doing?
Well, that's a whole other story.
That's what we're here to find out.
Well, this is a story I really not shared with anybody, but that particular morning, after we'd been shelled heavily, I was delegated to go back to Schaumburg to get some ammunition, and I also had an ulterior motive. Maybe I could pick up some stovepipe or something like that to kind of fix my bunker a little bit better. And I went with that particular truck. I was the only one sitting in the back of the truck, and I don't know who the driver was. Anyway, we got into Schaumburg, and they were really shelling Schaumburg. In fact, so much to the point that when I was in this truck, shells were landing right beside of the truck, and they had these stays across the top that was kind of kept the canopy, and a couple of pieces of shrapnel hit the stays and broke the stays. But anyway, I was able to look out of the back of the truck, and apparently the driver who was driving it felt this is no place, so they turned back to go back to the battery, and we stopped at Service Battery. And of course, Service Battery knew everything that was going on, and they were all excited and so forth. And there would be a person that Service Battery that was from Grand Rapids. And I don't know what his name was, but we always addressed each other as Grand Rapids. And I talked to him. Then anyway, we got back in the trucks again and headed back for the battery. Well, we had great difficulty getting back to the battery. I know when we came to the road near the battery, there was a lot of shooting going on, a lot of confusion. I jumped out of the back of the truck and joined my particular battery, and found one of the little bunkers, and was talking to this one and that one, and says, well, he was killed and he was killed, and our executive officer has been transported. And next thing I knew, I was assigned to go to the rear with one other man and an officer. I think there was 3 of us from B battery, and 3 of us from A battery, and 3 of them from C battery to go back to find new positions. And
new positions for
to retreat
to.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
So
yeah.
I was delegated to go with that group, and Major Goldstream was also with us. There was an officer from C battery that went with us, and we took some logging route to the rear. Of course, no lights. We walked in front of the truck so we could sort of find the way through this particular logging route. And anyway, they found a position that we were to go to retreat to. Well, they told me, well, B battery would be going here, and when they come to retreat, you tell them this is where they go. So I sort of looked around, and I found a little cave. So I thought I'll just go in this little cave here, more or less for protection. And while I was in the little cave, 388 shells landed within maybe 50 to 100 feet from me. I was in a protection, so that was no problem. Well, anyway, apparently B battery had great difficulty getting their guns out, and it was maybe at daybreak that they arrived at the second position. I mentioned to our switchboard operator, I think it'd be a good place to put your switchboard in this little cave that I was sitting in. So they set the switchboard in this little cave, and the next thing we were doing was lay some wire from this switchboard across the road. And I remember I was climbing up sort of a pole or something like that to run the wire across the road instead of under the road. And anyway, we never got the wire over to Service Battery, which is a little ways up the road. And the next thing I knew, we got notice that German tanks were coming down the road and we should evacuate.
This was
the morning of the 17th.
Okay. And the battle's been going on all night.
Right.
There's
And of
shelling, there's
course,
bullets, there's...
in fact, C Battery was completely encircled, and they could not get out. A Battery and B Battery would get out of their first position, but C Battery could not. The only one of the officers that got out was this Lieutenant Wright, who was with us looking for positions for them to retreat to. And our colonel thought it was maybe a good idea if he would join C Battery to help them, maybe pull out or whatever it could do. But then he was captured also.
What happened next? What happened that morning and the rest of that day?
Well, of course, German tanks were coming down the road, so I don't know who gave the order to evacuate, but anyway, A Battery truck came down the road, and another A Battery truck came down the road, and I jumped on one of A Battery's trucks, which was pulling a 105, and we head toward Schaumburg.
You got all your equipment, the radio equipment and whatnot, out of the cave? And
I was laying wire to go to Service Battery,
right.
And we had a special truck that would carry the additional wire and the switchboard, and they apparently had difficulty getting it out, which they did, and they put it on their truck, but I jumped on A Battery's truck for so good reason to get out of there because the German tanks were coming down the road. And our battery apparently had great difficulty getting the guns out. And
these are the larger guns? These are
105 Hausers.
Okay.
In fact, they never did get them out of the second position, and they destroyed the guns, and they got on their trucks, and some of the first trucks made it through Schaumburg. One of the last trucks, which our Captain Brown was on, did not make it. They opened up on him as they entered Schaumburg, and he jumped out of the truck, and there's a whole story about Captain Brown. 3 days later, he joined us at Parker's Crossroads, but I mean, in the meantime, evacuating. He was able, with a couple other men, to find his way back, and he joined our outfit when we were at Parker's Crossroads. But retreating after we had gone through Schaumburg was just another story.
Yeah.
I mean, they were shelling us heavily. We had run into German opposition here and there. At times we were supposed to jump out of the truck and go to the defense position. We kind of jumped out of the truck and got behind trees because we thought that Germans were coming in there because they had come into Schaumburg already earlier that day. And in the meantime, there were our own, I think it was the 3rd Armored Division or the 7th, I'm not sure, was pulling up with their guns, and it was just...
Did it feel like it was confusion, or was there...
Unreal confusion.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of these buzz bombs coming over. We would hear them, and then pretty soon the motor would stop and they would drop. And when they would drop, they would make the hole the size of a car. I heard them land, but none of them landed near us.
Yeah. This is what is called the Battle of the Bulge, right? This is when the
Battle
Germans...
of the Bulge and retreating. And,
yeah.
And of course, don't forget it was cold, and it was snowy, and the keeping warm was a real factor.
What were you wearing to keep off the cold?
I had an overcoat.
Yeah.
I had these something I put over my head, but plus the helmet. I keep my ears warm. I had gloves, but I just had regular boots. No thing for keeping your feet warm.
Yeah.
So consequently, during this period of time, I did freeze my feet.
I've talked to others who said that a lot of the casualties were weather related, as well as, you know, the bombs and the guns and all that kind of stuff. But the weather was also a huge factor in the Battle of the Bulge. So what happened next? You're in retreat.
Well,
what
we kept
happened?
retreating, and I remember we landed up in the town of St. Vith, and there's where I joined up with the men from my particular wire section. And I joined with them, and I was eager to get back with them.
Were they separated from you? Is that in the
They
retreat?
just took a truck after I.
Ah, okay, okay.
They followed us. They made it through Schaumburg, but the stragglers behind did not. And there's a whole story about an officer from A Battery, Eric Wood, who actually was one of the stragglers, and he received a very high medal because he called in all individual war in the Ardennes there.
Wow.
Anyway, there's a whole little story about that, which became in the Post magazine.
Where you're now in this other town.
Well, we were in Schaumburg, and then of course during this, between Schaumburg and St. Vith, we had to abandon our trucks and have defense positions. We ran into a lot of roadblocks. It was almost a parking lot of tanks coming up and other soldiers retreating because we had all the headquarters behind us yet. And of course the infantry was trying to retreat, and anyway, it was just mass confusion and a lot of shelling. And
you could see, during the day, you could see the scope
and it was
of this?
foggy, you could hardly see.
Oh.
It was cold and it was foggy.
Okay. But by the sound, you could tell the scope of this was huge. I mean, this is a big battle.
No little thing, no way.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start hearing all these, we call them buzz bombs going overhead and all the shelling, and we realized the Germans were nearby, we thought, now, what have we done wrong?
Yeah.
How come we retreated?
So, what happened next?
Well, anyway, I organized in St. Vith with my group from my wire section, and I don't know what happened each day, but anyway, by the 19th, we retreated and to an area which is near Beersum, which later on became Parker's Crossroads. We arrived just beyond that crossroads, and we were supposed to get organized. Maybe give us some food. We had really no food during that time, which was maybe a period of about 3 or 4 days, where we were not only retreating, but I mean, we were shelled heavily.
What about water?
Well, there's always snow.
Okay, yes, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
And for some reason or other, I was able to accumulate a bunch of D-bars.
What are D-bars?
They're hard, like chocolate candy bars.
Oh,
and I
okay.
had quite a few of those in my pocket, so I was able to nibble on that.
Oh, okay.
And we had some pills that we could put in our water to make it safe, so we could. I did have some of that. And anyway, we went just a little beyond this Parker's Crossroads, and we were more or less going to get organized. It would give us the privilege to sort of clean up and wash up. And we had 3 guns left of the 12 at that particular point. And I don't know exactly all the circumstances, but anyway, our particular truck, which was the wire section, we're going to go over to this farmhouse, which later on became Parker's Crossroads, and we were one of the first ones to arrive at this particular farmhouse. And I remember the gentleman there had just finished milking his cows. It was actually a barn that had several cows in it, and he offered me some milk, which I sort of refused, and then he took on his little cart and he went down the street. And then later on that night, we occupied that farmhouse, and we did sleep there that night. We pulled guard. We found a comfortable place to sleep, haystacks and so forth.
Was there the sounds of battle still?
At that time, I don't recall.
Okay, okay. So you're somewhat safe.
We're somewhat safe, correct. And the following morning, we got orders that this is going to be a defensive position. We're going to set up there.
Okay.
And this was just north of Bastogne, Hoffias, and so forth. I mean, it was a Rue Frontière, that particular crossroads.
Did you have any idea what was going on outside of your immediate?
No, only what happened right where I was.
Because Bastogne, of course, was a huge...
Never heard about it.
You didn't know any... Okay.
I knew nothing about that. I mean, I knew it was just south of us at
Yeah,
that time.
yeah.
But anyway, that following morning, we took our trucks and used that sort of as a protection around this particular building. We did lay some wire from the farmhouse to the road, and some men laid some we call daisy mines across that road. Officers must realize that there was a chance that Germans might come up that way. And we did a variety of things that day, but anyway, that following night, I was laying underneath the truck for a protection, and well, in the meantime, we had other groups. We had there was a variety of other retreating troops that sort of joined us. We had
so this wasn't an organized kind of thing. I'm getting the impression that just people are straggling.
They're straggling, and our particular group, which is the 589th, which was whatever left of A, B, and really nobody from C except for Lieutenant Wright, who joined us later on. And there was some headquarters people there from the 589th. And other retreating troops all sort of joined us here. The aircraft outfit, who had some big 50 caliber machine guns, joined us on, I think, the morning of the 20th. So we had 3 Hausers. We set those up more or less to go down the road as a defensive position. Well, on that particular morning, I think it must have been the morning of the 20th, a German patrol came down the road. Fairly large patrol. I don't know how many men, but maybe 25, 30, if not more. And the early ones were on bikes. They stopped at these daisy mines and were sort of checking them. And one of my friends happened to be operating the phone at this particular, where the daisy mines were, and reported there were Germans coming there. And we opened up our 50 calibers and mowed down these men. And there were other ones apparently too, because some of them came over to the area in which we were. We wounded many. I remember that night many of the Germans yelling, "Comrade, comrade," because we had wounded many of them. The next morning we saw several within maybe 50 feet of us that apparently were trying to pull up near us that were not living anymore. And we took care of some of the wounded. And that morning, I remember Major Parker was out there, and we had taken several prisoners, and he told me to lead some of these prisoners to the CP, which I helped him take them to the CP.
What was your impression of the Germans, and what did they look like? I mean, were these young men? Were they older men? Were they actually the prisoners that you were escorting out?
I don't remember the ones, the prisoners we were taking, but being curious, we kind of checked some of the dead ones, and very, very young. What struck us, the ones that particularly that was near us, just young kids. The ones that were running, I don't recall their age. I mean, they just kind of, we led them into the CP, and from what I understand, they were later on evacuated for interrogation and so forth.
Yeah. Were their uniforms clean, or were they looked like they were battle weary, like you guys were?
Well, they seemed to be pretty ready to give up, from what I understand.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because they realized that they were overpowered, and there were many really serious wounded, and we were taking care of the wounded. What really struck me that night, the comrade, they were yelling. I mean, they were willing to give up.
Yeah.
They were very eager to give up. Yeah. But so many things happened for the next 3-4 days. Sometimes I get mixed up between what happened one day and what happened the other day. And there was a haystack up there, and for some reason or other, there were some snipers that kind of got into that haystack, and they were shooting and knocking out some of our men and killing them. And finally, one of our officers figured, let's kind of put 50 caliber machine gun into that haystack. And the next thing I remember, that haystack was on fire and it was burning up. And then, of course, the following day, we were supposed to dig in, and we dug foxholes and dug deep foxholes and put all the protection we could over the top of them. And of course, again, it was cold, it was foggy, and I think because of the fog, they never realized what we really had there. And that was maybe a blessing in disguise. They did a lot of shelling. Apparently there was a couple of Panzer divisions which attacked us more than once, but they were repelled each time. But finally late on the 23rd, they came with all their power and with their tanks. And in the meantime, they had completely encircled us. They were trying to let us get out of there with our equipment because the 82nd Airborne was coming up. And anyway, so many things happened during those days.
I fully understand. I did the interview with Harold Falkerma. He had I thought, a very profound statement about the Battle of the Bulge. He says, I don't know when it started and I don't know when it ended, but I just know they were shooting at me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What happened to you next, you personally? What happened after the 23rd?
Well, again, as I mentioned, the 23rd, they made their big attack because they had completely surrounded us. Right. There was no way to escape. And I was in my foxhole, and of course we just had a carbine. We didn't have an M1 or anything like that, and I had plenty of ammunition. I had picked up an extra long cartridge, which maybe held maybe twice as many shells than ordinary. Yeah. And we were just shooting randomly, and pretty soon I got hit in the thumb, which kind of ripped my thumb. Well, for some reason or other, I thought I better get some help, so I went into the CP. Well, when I got in the CP, I thought what I had was nothing compared. There was men there that was, one had hit shot in the arm, and his arm was dangling, and one was hit in the face, pulling the teeth out of his mouth. So I sat there in that CP by the fireplace, trying to get warm. Somebody had captured a German officer, and they were interrogating that officer at the time. And I was just sort of listening in, because apparently one of our men could speak German and was interrogating him. I don't know what the comments were. And I remember there must have been a patrol from the 82nd Airborne that joined us, and they were gung-ho getting into battle, which sort of impressed me. And they said, "Where are the bazookas?" Well, you know where I said, "Where are the bazookas?" And the tanks must have hit our building, and a lot of debris came down, and some of the men, there was a basement to this particular farmhouse, and some men went into the basement, some went into the area where the cows were, and for some reason or other, John Schaffner and I thought we better take off. So we looked out of the door and across the field we went, which we realized the Germans were coming from that direction. We hid across the field, and I remember running across the field. There's sort of a ditch. Went under the ditch, and then there was a fence, and I was thinking, shall I jump this fence or shall I crawl underneath it? Well, I had my overcoat on, so I went underneath the fence, and I was crawling under the fence. Bang, I got hit in the thigh. My leg was numb. I could not walk anymore, so I crawled to another large ditch there. And so it happened that my friend John Schaffner was also there, and somebody dressed my wound. And between my good friend John and I, we headed towards the woods.
So there was other people. You said somebody dressed your wound. So there was other people gathered as you're crawling?
Right. Well, actually, there were some. See, the guns were placed in another area, and some of the men from the guns, or from the 105 Hauser, were told to leave.
Okay.
We were never told to leave.
Okay.
Because they realized the situation. But I mean, we were more or less in front of this particular CP, and we were supposed to stay there until whatever it might be. Because I was wounded in the thumb, I left my foxhole.
Right.
And the ones who stayed in there, they were all captured. And the ones that stayed in the CP, they were all captured. And most of them that were with the guns were also captured. But anyway, my friend Jan Schaffner and I and one other friend, we headed for the woods. And when we arrived in the woods, we were challenged by .30 caliber machine gun, which was 82nd Airborne men that were sort of coming to our defense. And I remember they said one wounded man, so we walked another, seemed to be a long distance, and there was a Jeep there that had all men already that had been seriously wounded on stretchers. And I told him, well, I can sit up. So I sat next to the driver, and from there I went to a field hospital and spent a few days there. In that field hospital there was many wounded, but also many German wounded also in that same hospital. And I spent a few days there, and then they sent me to another hospital in Liège. This was well after Christmas time. I spent a couple of days in the hospital in Liège. Of course, in the meantime, all they did was dress my wound, and they put me on a train. And I remember on the train, they gave me penicillin shots every 2 hours. And also earlier, they gave me plasma too. I don't know whether that was in the field hospital or whether it was in the Liège hospital. They gave me plasma because I had lost some blood. And then from there, I went to Paris. They put me in an ambulance, and I remember riding through Paris. Interesting things that I saw when I went through Paris.
Yeah, what happened in Paris? I mean, what was the experience of, you were wounded, right? You're being transported.
I'm being transported on stretcher, in a train, and later on in an ambulance.
Right.
And then they brought me to a hospital
In Paris.
in Paris, a hospital that had just been taken over by nurses that had just come from overseas.
Oh, wow.
And they were just setting up the hospital for all the wounded from the Battle of the Bulge. And
this was a big hospital.
it was becoming a big hospital.
Yeah.
There was a lot of really seriously wounded ones, and there were some there that were burned extensively from being hit. They were in tanks, and they were seriously burned and so forth. Anyway, this is where, when I arrived in this hospital in Paris, I wrote my first letter home, telling my folks what had happened to me. But in the meantime, they had received a notice from the government that I was missing in action. And of course, it must have taken a week or two before they received that notice, but that's where I wrote the first letters home after the Battle of the Bulge. Then anyway, I spent a few days in the hospital in Paris. Then they sent me to the airport, and I stayed there an extra day in the airport on a stretcher, laying on the ground in the airport, and they put me on a C-47 and flew me over to England, and I spent the next 4 months in the hospital recovering from wounds and from frozen feet.
These wounds were not superficial. This was a serious wound.
Well, it was not such a serious wound, but it numbed my leg, see.
Right.
Thereby my leg became immobile.
Right.
But in time, it must have hit some nerves or something like that, because it just deadened my leg. But anyway, when I wrote my folks, I says, nothing to worry about, didn't affect my appetite at all. I'm asking for seconds and thirds. So I thought I might as well encourage them.
Yeah. How you were in the hospital, finally recovered. Where'd you go from there? What happened?
After 4 months?
After you recovered, yeah, after the 4 months.
Oh, I had some unique experiences in the hospital there.
Yeah?
It so happened that the person in charge of the ward that I was in was somebody I knew from Grand Rapids. In fact, his wife went to the same church that I did. And after about, maybe 3 months, my wounds were healed, and my feet were still rather numb, and he gave me a job in the hospital because of Don. Mm-hmm. So I worked in the hospital, worked in an area where we rolled crinoline and made plaster rolls. Then I worked in surgery, and I would throw these crinoline rolls into a bucket and give them to the surgeon as they made casts for different people. But anyway, after I was there 4 months, I went back to my outfit. I had a pass. I think I had a week off. And anyway, I had some unique experiences. I went to met a friend who was in another hospital up north. I went to Paris, and
What was Paris like?
No, I'm sorry, I went to London.
London, okay.
I'm sorry, I went to London.
Yeah.
And of course, when I was in London, I wanted to find a place to go to church. So we stayed at the Red Cross, and at the Red Cross there they had places that people would host soldiers. The war was still going on,
Right.
so I had a place that I could go to church on that particular Sunday. And of course, in order to get to their home, I had to use the subway, and the subway was occupied by all kinds of people. They had beds and everything else in the subways. And anyway, I went to Clapham Common to a home that I visited, and I spent Saturday night, all day Sunday, and left Monday morning at this particular home. It was an older gentleman that had a daughter that was about 29, 30, and another daughter. And believe it or not, I kept communicating with this Violet Clark for the next 50 years. Communicated back and forth.
Wow.
My daughter made 2 trips to England. I stayed with her 2 times. Anyway, these are just some of the pluses,
Yeah.
you know.
Was your war experience over with at this time?
Not really. I went back to my outfit. The war was still going on, but when I had difficulty getting to my outfit because they had responsibility of taking care of prisoners. While I was going back, which was of course the first part of April, the war wasn't officially over yet, and I went from one rebel to another. I spent the next month, the rest of April and most of May, going from one rebel up to another, which was the good parts of my service. And I met some friends there from high school in these rebel depots, and I traveled all the way from Munster, Germany, well, of course, all the way across France on trains, on boxcars, and all the way up to Munster, Germany, and all the way down the Rhine River.
Did you get a sense that the war was either winding down or almost over?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I
There was a real
realized it.
sense of that.
Oh, yeah. But it was just a unique experience. We get on top of the boxcars, and I mean, we would see the beauty, the sights of the Rhine. And anyway, I joined my outfit.
How many, I mean, this is a tough question to ask, but were there a lot of guys not there anymore?
Nobody from my outfit.
Really?
It had completely reorganized. I did not know but a few.
Wow.
It was,
They were all almost all replacements.
they were all replaced, and they reorganized it, and I just came back as replacement. And we did some duty as far as searching homes. Anyway, it was a good experience after
So you
that.
weren't really in any danger after that?
After that,
Okay.
no.
What happened, where were you on VE Day when victory in Europe was declared? Do you remember?
Victory in Europe, I was possibly on a train headed for my outfit to go back to my outfit.
Was there any reaction to,
Oh, there was real celebration.
like what? What did you see?
Well, jubilation, that's all I can really say. We did not celebrate the way past the ones on the front lines with drinks and so forth,
Yeah.
but I mean, that was, in other words, we were going back, I was going back to my outfit,
Okay.
and that was my goal at that
Was
time.
there any thought of going to the Pacific?
Oh, yes. In fact, I left my outfit in August to go back to the States to join, I think it was 104th Division, then go over to the Pacific. So we were sent from my outfit across, again, France, and we were at one of these places. In other words, we went on the Queen Elizabeth to go home. And while we were getting ready to get on the Queen Elizabeth, there was VJ Day, and there was great celebration. So again, I was in sort of a camp never really celebrated. But when we arrived in New York Harbor on the Queen Elizabeth, one of the first large ships that arrived in the harbor, we had a celebration that I will never forget. They came out with boats, flat tops with bands on it, and we were really greeted there. And again, when I was on this Queen Elizabeth, I think there was maybe hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of men on there. I met a classmate of mine on that ship too, from high school, and he was coming back from Europe. He had been in the Air Force. And
What was the moment of coming home like? When you arrived back to Grand Rapids, what was that moment like? Did you get off a train or?
well, yeah, we landed in one of the camps on the East Coast, and of course it was, the war is over with. I forget all the different camps we went to.
No,
but,
I'm talking about
anyway.
getting home. I mean, going home, your parents are there to greet
Yes.
you.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about that. What happened when you got home? You're in your uniform, right?
Oh, yeah. But of course, my military service is not over with it. I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I want to try and get that moment. Did they meet you at the train station, or did you go to the house? How did you get home?
Well, we landed in Chicago, and I had an uncle that lived just outside of Chicago. And we had quite a wait before we get the train to Grand Rapids. So I think we had 6-8 hours before we get the next train. So I went to visit my uncle in Chicago. And he was mostly elated to see me, my uncle and aunt. And of course, in the meantime, I had called my folks that I was coming home. And I don't remember exactly how my folks greeted me, but I'm sure there was just elation there.
Yeah.
But they knew I was coming home because I had,
Sure.
and I think I told my dad, I said, make sure you have the car ready, because I was given a 30-day furlough, and later on I was extended. I had 45 days home, and during this time I met my wife, who I married 4 years later, and then I was sent from there to Camp Campbell, Kentucky. I had some typing experience, so they put me in discharge center, and I was involved in discharging other servicemen. And finally, December of 45, I had enough points to be discharged, and I was discharged from Fort Knox, Kentucky, and that was the end of my military career. But there were some enjoyable times too.
Yeah. I got one more question for you. How do you feel your military experience shaped, and I don't mean just battle or the trauma, but I mean the overall military experience, shaped the person that you are today?
I grew up from being a naive young man to realizing,
Well, I want to thank you very much for sitting down here with me and talking. And we'll talk more. Thank you, sir. Thank you
Yes.
very much.